No deal today, we understand, but White House and congressional negotiators continue to try and see if they can reach a deal to raise the nation's debt ceiling. It's basically agreeing to increase the limit on the credit card and avoid default. But time is running short, although we've been saying that for, the past 3 months. There are now only 8 days left before June 1st. That's when Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says there may not be enough money to pay the government's bills.
At some point in time, somebody's got to pay these bills. And Washington can't keep spending money it doesn't have. And so we're at the table saying we've got to get control over spending. We rebaseline the pre-COVID spending numbers, which is very reasonable.
We see these conversations moving in a productive way. That is important, and we'll get there. It has to be a bipartisan, right? It has to be a bipartisan, reasonable budget negotiation.
Robby Soave back with the panel, senior editor at Reason, co-host of Rising on the Hill with us as well. I just sort of thought about this, but if there were no television cameras to chase Kevin McCarthy and Hakeem Jeffries and the ranking member of the Budget Committee around Capitol Hill, and there were no reporters to keep bothering Joe Biden and say, is there a deal on the debt ceiling? I kind of feel like this would be done pretty quickly.
Sure, and I think most people expect that we have 8 days to go, that there will be a deal eventually. You know, Republicans are in a difficult position because they are in charge of the government sometimes, and they do keep spending more money. So then I think people don't believe them exactly when they say, yeah, we really got to rein in the spending. Well, when? We can only rein in the spending when Democrats are in control and you don't have total control over the process. So I think there's a little bit of fatigue. And also, what, are we going to cut entitlements, Social Security, Medicare? Are we going to cut military, the budget? All those things get taken off the table. What's left? They don't want to raise taxes, which I don't want to raise taxes either. But that's where you get in this frustrating position where if everything's off the table, then we're not going to rein in the spending. So that's the end of the story.
And that's why the Republicans are going to get blamed if we go over the cliff, for all the reasons that my colleague just said. And so there will be a deal done. I don't think the Democrats or Biden are going to be blamed for this, but there will be a deal done because even the Republicans, those entitlement cuts hurt Republican families too.
Okay, but we can all agree that Democrats did not expect for Kevin McCarthy to pass a bill. And it seems
knew it would be difficult for them, but
but they did it. But it seems as though Democrats are now using the talking points from a month ago before the bill was passed and are now a little late to catch up to the reality that, yeah, Republicans actually passed something as objectionable as some Democrats find it.
Well, what Joe Biden said, go pass the bill and then we'll talk. And so they went and passed the bill, and now they're talking. I expect the Democrats are concerned about what Biden is going to compromise on. I think on the spending part, he's going to give in some, but not too much, because, again, these entitlements and these military cuts, right, hurt not only Republican families, but Democratic families and American families. And so, as a result, there's a deal to be done. The question is, who's going to be blamed if it doesn't get done, and who's going to get the credit if it does get done?
I think when we say the word cut, it's important to note that in many cases, you know, I think in this instance too, we're actually talking about a slowdown in the increase. That's actually not, by definition, a cut. It's actually just a slower of an increase. And I think that that rhetoric is lost. When you're talking about $31 trillion of debt, that's just unsustainable. Our debt to GDP ratio is higher than it's been since World War II. We're spending as if we're in a wartime setting, but we're not at war. So what happens when we do get to go to war? The U.S. dollar is going to be, you know, turned into wheelbarrows full like after World War II. So we can't keep treating the U.S. dollar like monopoly money. We have to have some fiscal accountability. I agree with Robby that when the Republicans were, you know, I asked the Trump White House over and over, you're doing these massive COVID bills, like, what happens to the conservative, base here who says we put you in office to stop the spending? They said, well, it's an emergency situation. Well, now Biden's in office, the emergency's over. So why not change your spending trajectory as a Democrat? Because even Biden himself said the emergency's over.
Well, we got one big problem. That's the Ukraine war that we're spending billions of dollars on to protect democracy and to protect Ukraine from Russia. So I hear what you're saying, but the bottom line is that those cuts or slowdowns, however you want to say it, are going to hurt working families and poor families. And the Republicans and the Democrats, no matter how much they yell and scream, they're not going to hurt those families in the end, and they're not going to cut the military because we are in some level of an intellectual war or political policy war with China and Russia and other enemies. So it's just not going to happen. Now, if you bifurcate the spending bill, or rather you bifurcate the bill that's going to allow the government to continue to go on, and then you say, okay, we're going to have to do a second deal in regard to spending cuts because we've got to reduce the deficit. That's very plausible, very reasonable, and most Americans can understand and appreciate that. That's really the best way. You may disagree, but that's the best way to do it.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.